is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Juliet Mann.
And I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories. The UN says rescue efforts in Syria and Turkey are coming to a close, with the focus now on the millions made homeless by last week's earthquakes.
Still waiting for aid to arrive. We report from a remote village in one of the worst affected areas where people are making risky choices to survive.
Heavy shelling in the city of Bakhmut. Russia says it's making gains in eastern Ukraine.
The World Trade Organization begins deliberations over a complaint by Beijing against the US ban on semiconductor exports.
And back at full throttle, North America's biggest car show gets hands-on.
The United Nations says the rescue efforts after last week's earthquakes in northern Syria and Turkey are coming to a close.
On a trip to Syria, UN's emergency chief said the focus of teams on the ground was switching to providing help for survivors. The death toll from the disaster has now topped 36,000. Millions are homeless, and the UN says many are in need of food and other emergency assistance.
Well, in a moment, we'll hear from our correspondent, Evangelos Tsipsas, who's in Osmaniye in southern Turkey. But first, let's talk to our correspondent, Zara Al-Dazri, who's in the Syrian city of Aleppo. Zara, what problems have the United Nations identified in Syria in particular? That's not... I'm terribly sorry. We have a little bit of a sound issue there. We'll move on and try and get back to him later on.
Well, to Turkey now, and our correspondent Evangelos Tsipsas is standing by for us. Evangelo, what's the latest there where you are?
Well, I'm standing in Osmaniye, one of the largest centers or camps for displaced people from the deadly earthquakes. Right behind me, you can see the hundreds of tents where people are sleeping in. The conditions here, unfortunately, are quite cold, and you can see right behind me people just putting on some fire, trying to stay warm. Now, these are the people who were able to survive the deadly earthquakes, but as we already know, the death toll has been climbing up quite a lot, and there's still people missing. There are more than 200,000 people missing that are still under the rubble as we speak. Now, the efforts continue to go on, but the rescue missions have changed from being rescue to a recovery mission, as the possibility or the hope of those people being pulled out of those the rubble or the debris alive are very, very slim or fading away. Now, there are a lot of trauma centers are overwhelmed with the people who have gone in with injuries. A lot of made-up pharmacies, a lot of made-up trauma centers in camps like this are set up for those who have either broken bones or either some injuries, losing blood. But we have to point out here that it is possible that in the next few days or in the weeks we'll be seeing more and more consequences of the health issues that the people here will be facing. So as if right now here the recovery mission rescue mission has ended, and now has turned into a recovery mission of pulling out people who are still under the rubble.
And Evangelo, an unexpected visit from the Greek foreign minister. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, the last few months we've seen this rhetoric between the two countries have gone quite up, and the relationship between the two countries are going in all-time low over territorial disputes over the Aegean island, or perhaps the instrumentalization of migrants. But the Greek foreign minister, did arrive here. He hugged his counterpart, Mr. Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, and they had a little quick chat. And here's what both of them had to say.
The best to you and your family.
After years of fraught relations, a hug in the midst of devastation brings Greece and Turkey close together. The Greek Foreign Minister Nikos Dendias was in Antakya, one of the worst areas affected by the earthquakes, and said that the two neighbors needed to cherish this relationship in the future.
I'd like to add what already my counterpart Cavusoglu said. We should not wait for natural disasters to further strengthen our relations.
But the same feeling is also shared by the Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis.
And this is a time to leave aside, our political differences and to offer a hand of friendship to the Turkish people, the Syrian people, who are suffering a horrible catastrophe. And frankly, when it comes to the relations between our two countries, I cannot imagine of a stronger message than a Greek rescue worker, a Turkish rescue worker working together.
In solidarity with his neighbor, Greece has begun a countrywide drive to collect relief supplies for earthquake victims in Turkey and Syria. Citizens are being asked to donate essential materials including blankets, flashlights, milk, dry food, and water. An array of institutions, including ministries, local governments, and trade unions, are already conducting air drives across the country.
I've brought a first aid kit, milk, water, vitamins, blankets, anything we can for the people that are suffering.
And the message is clear: no politics.
Times are tough. They really need us right now. We should put aside our country's issues and focus on helping. There are people still buried under the rubble. That's what matters, nothing else.
Donations are expected until Tuesday, and the first 3 trucks with humanitarian aid have already crossed into Turkey and are expected to be delivered sometime midweek. While some call the Greek help earthquake diplomacy, others simply see it as just a helping hand. Foreign ministers pledged that they want to continue that relationship. They want to continue this friendly relationship between the two, and said that they will continue to talk to provide more aid from Greece, to provide more aid to Turkey. After the Greek rescue teams have left, now on the way we have humanitarian aid. About 3 to 4 trucks have crossed into Turkey with aid from Greece and are expected to arrive sometime now. And the two foreign ministers said they would have a direct line for each other to communicate whatever Turkey needs, whatever they want. As quoting here, Mr. Dendias said, we will give it to our brother, we will give it to our neighbors. So it's expected again, Mr. Dendias, to arrive here to overlook the operation that the Greeks are doing, and it will stay in contact with his Turkish counterparts, making sure that he will assist in whatever they need. Either that would be equipment, medical supplies, or even the way to get into the European Union.
Sas reporting live from southern Turkey. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, unfortunately, we aren't able to re-establish that connection with Zara in Syria. So let's talk now to Thomas Tai, who is the President and CEO of Direct Relief, a non-profit humanitarian medical organisation. Thanks ever so much for coming on the programme. What is the latest that you're hearing from your teams on the ground?
Well, it tracks with what your reporters are saying. I think the search and rescue period, it's a time-limited window, and so as that changes, I think what emerges are the basic issues of food, water, shelter, sanitation, and we focus on the health and medical component, which your correspondent talked about. So we've mobilized the first 20 tons or so and trying to make sure it's the right material, that it's approved by the government. We've worked in Syria for years with the Syrian American Medical Society, that's the largest provider of health services in northwest Syria. So we've had good contact with them. Our folks are with their teams trying to mobilize and make sure that not only the material is right, but the logistics channels are open to get the material into Syria, as well as working with the teams in Turkey at the municipal level, the critical care facilities where a lot of the medevacs are going to make sure we can mobilize material either from the States or from Europe, which we do frequently. So it's an unfolding situation, but that's what we're doing at the moment.
Are there conversations yet happening about the support for trauma, for psychological damage for the people who have survived? I'm thinking of the many, many children who've lost family, who've been displaced. Or is that a conversation for later, once you've done this basic rescue and aid packages?
Well, I think it's on everyone's mind. It occurs a bit in the background, as you can imagine. I think that those who have can be saved, I think the critical care facilities that the medevacs are going to, they're stocked out as well. So I think for now it's an infusion of material to treat the wounded, as well as the chronically ill who've been displaced. You know, if you were managing a chronic condition like diabetes or hypertension and it becomes unmanaged, you too can find yourself in an acute health crisis. So everything that was bad before it still exists, and it's got a whole level of enormous need on top of it. So I think the scramble is
according to the WHO, at least 60,000 people are reported injured. You've mentioned the hospitals that are overrun. I think 15 hospitals in Turkey are reported destroyed, though. Resources are needed desperately. I mean, how huge is the gap?
Well, you know, we can stipulate it's huge. We don't know the full dimensions because the information is still a little spotty. I think that aggregation of all this need from multiple sites is a challenge, but we're doing the best we can in picking the municipal referral facilities, working with the Critical Care Society of Turkey, the people who run the ICUs, and they tend to have a very good sense of what's needed and what specific supplies can be, obtained locally and what we can bring in from outside Turkey. So we're doing that as we speak and mobilizing a lot of material. I think the world wants to help, but we're also cognizant of how important it is to make sure it's the right material that gets to the right places in the hands of the right people who are trained to use it.
Well, I do hope you get all of the support you need. Thomas Ty, President of Direct Relief, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Still ahead here on CGTN. Investors on both sides of the Atlantic await US inflation data and the Fed's next move. We're live in New York next.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann.
Hello there, welcome back. A reminder that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online, on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app. And in the UK, we're available 24 hours a day on Freeview.
It's all eyes on US inflation. CPI data for January will be released before Wall Street opens on Tuesday, and investors will be looking for clues about the Federal Reserve's interest rate strategy. Our correspondent John Terrett is in New York, and it's always great to talk to him. So, John, good to see you. Why is everybody talking about inflation?
Don't know. Good question. No, because it's very, very important. That's why it's very important. You know, it's a funny thing because Paul and Juliet, once upon a time, it was the jobs data that came out every month on the first Friday of every month for the previous. That was always the most important piece of economic data. Not anymore. It's CPI, consumer price inflation. And at the moment, many economists here on Wall Street think that we might have a little bit of bad news tomorrow, which is not very good news at all. It all happens at about 13:30 GMT. That's when the Labour Department publishes these figures. And at least part of the figures that they give us is expected to go go up. And we don't want inflation to go up, do we? We want to go down. That's what this fight is all about. Let me explain. I think at the moment it is thought that it may go up what they call month on month. So that would be December to January, probably not year on year, which would be January to January of 2022. And the reason is not hard to fathom out. If you remember, early in January, we got news of the incredible number of jobs that were added in the month of December here, 517,000 of them. Nobody predicted that. And the nearest economist on Wall Street was a guy over at Citigroup who got 300,000. So he was 200,000 and 17,000 off. Absolutely extraordinary that we had it so wrong, but we did. So at the same time, you have to remember we have this kind of twin-speed economy here where people are being taken on, but also other people, a lot of them in the tech arena, are being laid off. So you always have to bear that in mind. So this is the story of inflation as we see it at the moment. So in June of last year, it was at the high of just over 9%. In November, it was down to 7%. Then in December, this is year on year, it was 6.5%. Okay, so this is what we're expecting tomorrow now. So month on month, economists are looking for it to be at 0.4%, and this is slightly higher than it was in December, and that's what I'm talking about going back up. Year on year, we're expecting it to be 6.2%, not the 6.5% it was in December. So we will know in 24 hours from now. In the meantime, the markets are rallying into this very important figure. The Dow is up almost 1%, the Nasdaq more than 1%, and the S&P 500 by the same amount as the Dow Jones. And the Federal Reserve doesn't meet in February. They won't be meeting to discuss interest rate hikes. They will meet again quite a long way away, 21st and 22nd of March. So that's why a number like this is being seen as so important, because it will give everybody a good steer on where this inflation dilemma is going.
I think everybody's looking at that data all around the world. But what about company news? Because fourth quarter earnings seasons, that's sort of winding down a bit, isn't it?
Yes, once you get past the big tech names, the bubbles kind of burst a bit, really. I mean, the other companies, of course, are very important, don't get me wrong, but in particular, the retail sector, which we haven't really had yet. But no, it's kind of winding down now. And it's been a little bit underwhelming one way and another. Let me clarify that. I mean, many companies on the S&P 500, a healthy percentage, way more than half, have been beating Wall Street expectations, but they haven't been beating it by as much as in the past. That's the thing. And this is kind of amplifying worries on Wall Street about investing in certain companies going forward. Now, I will tell you this. The mood, as it were, on Wall Street has moved away from talk of recession into talk of inflation and how long it's going to last, rather than tipping it over into recession. The conversation's gone away. And this is because the UK last week, I think, narrowly avoided a recession, didn't it? And today the European Union is predicting pretty meager growth, but they are predicting growth of 0.8%. And it's the same kind of thing here. So as we go down this week, there will be some big names giving us their earnings, but not quite as big as your Microsofts and your Googles and your Netflix. We'll hear from Airbnb. We'll hear from Coca-Cola, who'll have to match what their rival Pepsi did last week, which was to grow their sales by 10%. Even the demand for their products was down quite a bit because they've been putting up their prices. We'll hear from Cisco, the company that makes the bits that drive the internet, Hasbro, the toy company, Roku, which transmits CGTN, among other things. God bless them. We love Roku. And John Deere, right at the end of the week. John Deere, the tractor company, home of the old joke, would you like to buy this tractor, sir? Yes, but it's too dear.
Oh, John. Well, lots of fabulous company news and a terrible dad joke. Bye for now. I'm John Terrett at the New York Stock Exchange. Thank you. Let's take a look at European markets now, after what was the worst week for US equities so far this year. So looking at what's happening there, a bit of treading water ahead of the latest US inflation data, which comes out on Tuesday, as we've been hearing about, and that's, as we've heard about, going to steer the Federal Reserve's rate hike strategy. So let's have a look. OK, here's the FTSE in London. Look, yeah, up a smidge, not even 1%, but still in positive territory, within touching distance of the record close it had on Thursday. It was house builders, really, that were a bit wobbly there after Deutsche Bank downgraded ratings for a number of market leaders in the sector. And it's, a similar muted picture on the Pan-European Stock 600 index, up a percent 0.5% there, so in positive territory, but not really getting too excited. Most sectors, most major bourses in marginally positive territory by mid-afternoon on Monday. And let's take a look at gold, because this is also very much connected to that key US inflation data. Now, gold prices, inched a little bit higher earlier on in the day as the dollar firmed, but as you can see, closing the day 0.5% down. Right, well, let's talk to Fiona Cincotta, who's an analyst at City Index. Great to see you, Fiona. Now, we know it's all eyes on that US inflation data. We've heard from our correspondent in New York, and I'm wondering, what do you think those numbers are going to mean for the markets?
Yes, so, we had that... We've seen a very strong start to 2023 as far as the markets are concerned, especially those growth stocks. Last week, we lost momentum because we had some hawkish commentary from Federal Reserve policymakers who were warning of, inflation staying high for longer and interest rates having to remain high for longer. So there really is a lot of focus on these numbers in order for the market to really reassess the likelihood of or the future path that Fed interest rates could take. So, we're seeing very much the markets focused on this. Expectations are that there could be a slightly higher read, as we've heard. And I mean, this is going to set the market's views of what the Federal Reserve is going to do next. At the moment, the market's pricing in that the Fed will raise interest rates by 25 basis points in that March meeting. That's pretty much completely priced in. And so the market will be also considering, will there be more rate hikes, perhaps in May?
Let's look at the European macro picture, because something I thought was quite interesting that came out was the European Commission being more upbeat about the bloc's growth and saying they've actually avoided technical recession. So, Fiona, what's changed?
Yes, good news. We love a bit of good news. So the growth forecast was upwardly revised to 0.9% from 0.3 just back in November. So we've seen quite a reasonable change just in a few months. Now, what we've seen is gas prices have come down considerably. So those fears of a sort of energy supply crunch have been eased and have calmed down a lot. We've also seen that inflation, although still high, is trending lower. We're expecting that peak inflation in the Eurozone has now passed and is moving lower. And then we've also got this incredibly resilient labour market. So if we look at the unemployment figures, unemployment, it was 6.6% in the last reading. And, compared to this time last year, that's more or less the same as where it was. So, jobs have held up, and that's helped consumer spending held up. So it appears that the picture isn't quite as terrible as we thought it could be just a few months ago. And I think that's really helped stocks rally across the start of this year. I mean, we've seen the Euro Stoxx 50, for example, is up around 11% since the start of the year.
So that's positive news for the bigger picture, for the longer term. There's quite a bit of economic data that's expected from across Europe, isn't there? What should we be keeping our eye out for?
Yes, so as we've said, the big one without a doubt is US inflation. But there is then other stuff to be looking out for. So we've got the Eurozone GDP. This is the second reading, so it's not usually as market moving as the first reading, but still it's definitely one to be looking towards. We're expecting 0.1% growth quarter on quarter, so again, avoiding a contraction there. You've also got in UK, you've got UK inflation data, which is also due out on Wednesday, and that is expected to just tick down again very slightly. But that comes after we've heard a lot from the Bank of England recently, who are expected to also continue to hike interest rates to tame inflation. And also there's jobs data coming out from the UK. So there's plenty for the markets to be focusing on, especially in the first couple of days of this week.
Fiona Cincotta, pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
A World Trade Organization panel is set to begin deliberations over a lawsuit brought by China against the United States. Beijing lodged the complaint after Washington imposed an export ban on semiconductors. It's led to bitter exchanges. At a WTO meeting last month, China called the US a unilateral bully, while Washington accused Beijing of illegal retaliatory measures. Our correspondent, Zhou Jiaxin, reports.
The World Trade Organization will begin looking into China's lawsuit against the U.S. over its curbing of chip exports. The 60-day period of consultation expired on Monday, but a settlement remains out of reach as the tech and trade war between the world's two largest economies intensifies. China's Commerce Ministry has described Washington's decision to cut off Chinese chip makers from U.S. suppliers as abusing export control measures and obstructing normal international trade, adding that it is a typical trade protectionist practice.
China believes that those restrictions are against WTO rules and the spirits of trade liberalization and are discriminatory to Chinese companies. So China has initiated a dispute case in the WTO. But we expect that the U.S. will invoke the national security exemptions to defend its measures.
Last month, the U.S. defended its tariffs on imported steel and aluminum, saying it is in the interest of national security. It said the U.S., not the WTO, gets to decide what qualifies as national security. But WTO panels ruled that Washington's measures were not implemented at a time of war or other emergency, and therefore was inconsistent with national security exemptions.
If a member wants to invoke national security exemptions, it has to meet with certain WTO requirements. The U.S. always insisted that it has the full self-judge power to explain national security-related measures. The U.S. argument is not standing here.
China's foreign ministry has accused the U.S. government of suppressing Chinese companies by stretching the concept of national security and abusing state power. President Joe Biden has also asked the Netherlands and Japan to block chips to China. Beijing says it will continue to work for the rights and interests of Chinese companies. It stresses that Washington should stop its efforts to contain and suppress China, and that it should not create new obstacles for the already strained bilateral relations. Zhou Jiaxing, CGTN, Beijing.
China has outlined 9 key tasks to promote rural development this year. They're contained in the #1 central document. That's the government's first policy statement for 2023. Now, one of the priorities is food security to prevent any large-scale return of poverty. It also stresses the importance of building stronger infrastructure for farming. Work on agriculture and rural areas has been high on the agenda for 20 consecutive years since 2004.
Chinese online shopping app Temu has run an advert during the US Super Bowl for the first time. It is rare for a Chinese firm to buy a Super Bowl slot, which costs millions of dollars. The number of people using the app has grown rapidly since it launched on the Apple Store in September.
Car makers Nissan and Renault say they plan to invest $600 million in producing 6 new models. The freshly revived alliance will be developing the cars in India over 3 to 5 years. They'll include 2 electric models and 4 SUVs to be sold in India and around the world. India's overtaken Japan to become the world's 3rd largest car market.
There's more news ahead. Specialist equipment used to find survivors under the rubble. The rescue team from China looking for signs of life. Next.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities, reinvent, find new opportunities, discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about The difference.
Brazen acts.
The difference is in the detail. The background.
Defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story. Wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with me, Juliet Mann, and Paul Barber. Our top headline. The United Nations says rescue efforts in Syria and Turkey are coming to a close, with the focus now on the millions made homeless by last week's earthquakes.
Well, Chinese rescue teams have been helping to find people under the rubble since the earthquake struck a week ago. One of the teams has been on the move, responding to reports of possible survivors. Our correspondent, Zhenzu Wen, reports from the Turkish city of Antakya.
This is a campsite of China's search and rescue team in the city of Antakya. As you can see far behind me, the team members are now ready to head to a rescue location where people have been reporting that there might be a chance of people who might be still alive under the rubble. So now they're bringing their equipment with radar as well as drilling equipment to see if they can save another person out of the rubble. This is already more than 170 hours after the earthquake has hit Turkey. So far, the China Search and Rescue Team has rescued 6 people out of the rubbles, and that was about when the earthquakes has hit the region, more than 150 hours. And let's take a look here. This is the machine that they bought with us. You can see it actually has a drilling spot that helps to break through concrete. According to experts, that this location is mostly the buildings are made with steel and concrete, so this kind of equipment helped them to drill through those heavy layers to rescue the people out of the areas. This is the sleeping area of the rescue team. You can see there are 14 tents right here, and they are in bunk beds, so each tent can hold about 12 people. Well, we're fortunate enough to have them because the temperature is so different from day to night, and the people who lost their home have to sleep on the street and cover themselves in layers of blanket. As the rescue mission has now shifted from rescue to rebuild, we hope that the people can return to their home as early as possible. Chen Ziyuan, CGTN, Antakya.
Xie Ming is a member of China's Advanced Blue Sky Rescue Team in Malatya in southern Turkey. He's been telling us about the challenges they've been facing.
It's a very challenging environment. We are facing sub-zero temperature. It could go down to minus 15 degrees in the night. And we are facing constant aftershocks. So I'm deeply honored and touched by the locals. They are the hardest hit. They are the victims. They bring out a lot of hot teas and soups, which is they themselves are deprived of the resources, and they work with the rescue teams around the clock in the night, minus 15 degrees. We set up campfires to keep our body warm. We take shifts to to try to save the survivors. It takes easily 12-20 hours to recover a survivor or a victim.
For more on the challenges facing emergency teams, let's bring in Trent Murray now. He's in the city of Malatya in southern Turkey. So, Trent, what's the United Nations been saying?
Well, the UN is really echoing what we are increasingly seeing on the ground, which is this is moving now from a rescue operation to a recovery one, not just here in southern Turkey, of course, Paul, but also over the border in Syria, where we understand the situation is still incredibly bleak because there is just no central command structure in place for rescue operations. You've got different factions and groups controlling different areas, and that has slowed down both the rescue operations but also the delivery of aid. Some criticism has been levelled at the UN over how slow slow some of their aid has gone in. They have also said that it has been difficult for them trying to negotiate with those different factions and groups. But on the wider situation across this entire region, the UN is saying that it is a major humanitarian crisis and the world is going to need to really step up to help people at this time here. Let's have a listen to what Martin Griffiths, who's the UN Emergency Response Coordinator, let's have a listen to what he had to say.
What we've seen happening in these zones of the earthquake is that the rescue phase is dragging live people out from the rubble and finding those who died in the rubble. That's coming to a close. And now the humanitarian phase, the urgency of providing shelter, psychosocial care, food, schooling, and a sense of the future for these people. That's our obligation now.
Trent, how are the people you've been speaking to feeling about the prospect of finding any more people alive now? Is hope starting to fade?
Well, I mean, in Malatya, really, they are now winding down operations. This particular site was a 5-storey apartment building complex. We have spent a little bit of time here, including earlier in the week, with some of those Blue Sky rescue crews from Sichuan in China. But they are now saying that after spending days here using sniffer dogs and thermal imaging cameras and also acoustic equipment to listen for people's voices, they're highly confident there is just nobody else in there alive. The Turkish team's working up there now to try and recover several bodies, as we understand it, and to not only respectfully recover them, but also then to assist families with a burial. There are many families here watching, anxiously waiting for news. We've even seen some belongings brought down from that pile of rubble, including kids' backpacks and a briefcase and ladies' handbags, in order to distribute them amongst the family to try and identify if it belonged to one of the people they're looking for. It's obviously a very sad moment as they switch to that recovery mode, but they're going to continue throughout the night and probably coming days until the job is officially done.
Trent Murray in Malatya in southern Turkey. Thank you very much.
Well, as you've been hearing from Trent, Malatya province in Turkey is one of the areas worst affected by the earthquakes. Our correspondent Michal Bardavid has been meeting some of the survivors.
Malatya is one of the 10 provinces severely damaged by the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria last week. Hundreds of buildings collapsed and rescue efforts were focused on the city center. But many surrounding villages were impacted as well. Dursun Torun, a father of 5, managed to save his family, but not his flock of sheep.
When the earthquake first struck, we got up right away. I went to the children's room. I grabbed the kids and brought them outside. My daughter was startled and rushed to another room. I grabbed her as well. While I was about to leave with my daughter and my wife, the frame of the door was cracking. As soon as we stepped outside, the house collapsed.
This is the village of Kotangölü. Dozens of houses were destroyed here or too damaged to enter. 6 days after the earthquake, and many families say they still haven't received tents and are in desperate need of shelter.
We could have died too, but we survived, so we might as well not die now. In this snow, it's cold, -10, -15 degrees. Not one of us has tents. We have kids. I have grandkids this big. Where do I put them? I don't know. I'm keeping them waiting in my car.
Desperate for a place to sleep, some individuals have been risking their safety by entering damaged buildings to retrieve their belongings, including mattresses. Though tents have not arrived, locals are grateful that other aid supplies have.
The roads were closed with snow. They couldn't open the roads. It snowed heavily. It was very difficult for us to reach the villages in the first 2 days. But now the work of the Malatya municipality is very good. They have opened the roads. Now we are delivering aid to all the villages. I don't think there is a village that isn't receiving help right now.
The Turkish government has promised that tents would soon be delivered to the Kotangölü village, and it's scrambling to build tent and container cities across the 10 provinces. Michal Bardavid, CGTN, Malatya.
Israel was one of the first countries to send aid and begin their rescue mission in Turkey. So far, they've pulled 19 people alive from the rubble. Earlier, I spoke to Nadav Markman, Israel's deputy ambassador to Turkey.
So it's a big-scale operation. We are running here headquarters and the excavation and the rescue teams on ground. We have about 30 different teams. Yes, we are not working together. We want to save as many lives as possible simultaneously. And we have a field hospital, which is located about 20-30 minutes from our camp. So all of this together has to be managed in a way. I'm, as a representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I'm here to coordinate between all those troops, who most of them are IDF, Israel Defense Forces, and local authorities. This includes the airport. I mean, we've landed more than 20 planes here, and inside them more than 150 tons of equipment in order to work and to have all this complicated operation running. In addition to that, we've also donated through our foreign aid agency, Mashav, over 60 tons of winter equipment, which we gave to AFAD, the emergency authority, and 2 municipalities. All those 60 tons of equipment was already handed out to citizens who need that. It's not easy to be here, I must tell you. I mean, I see people on the streets having to warm with fires. The nights here are extremely cold. I'm living in a tent and I'm not complaining because some people lost everything they have. I mean, a few nights ago it was -5 degrees Celsius. The record here, as far as I know, was -16 when I was here. It's extremely difficult. And if it's okay with you, I might share one specific story from our forces on the ground. Is that okay?
Please, please do.
A few nights ago, a small team of ours went into a building and found a woman and her kid trapped inside. They were alive, they were communicating with our troops, and throughout the whole night, it was a 36 hours long operation of getting them out very carefully in order for them to stay alive and to rush to hospital right away. After 36 hours of hard work, they were out, both of them, and went right away to a hospital.
Just extraordinary, really wonderful to hear that. And what are the most pressing priorities now for you there, and what is the next phase of the rescue response effort?
So I think now the Israeli search and rescue teams and the whole delegation is focusing more on the field hospital because, you know, 7-8 days after the disaster, it's getting, unfortunately, more and more difficult to get out people alive. But our field hospital has treated over 320 injured and people who need treatment, and they are working at it 24/7 also, non-stop. All the departments, they're just not resting. I've been there twice. I've seen the work done. They're working shoulder to shoulder with Turkish doctors and nurses. They brought a lot of medicine and equipment from Israel, and everything is towards one thing, to treat the local people as best as possible, to assist them, and to also assist the local authorities in this grand effort.
Heavy Russian shelling has been reported in the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut, seen as a key target for Moscow.
Ukraine's military says 16 settlements around the city have been hit, but it says its troops have pushed back against Russian attacks in some areas, despite Russian claims to have advanced by several kilometres along the front line. Well, our correspondent Will Denslow is in Kyiv. Will, Bakhmut has been experiencing heavy shelling from Russia, according to Kyiv. Tell us more.
Yeah, well, the message from NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg is that this long-awaited and anticipated new offensive is underway, with reports that Moscow is sending more troops, more weapons and more capabilities to its forces on the front lines. When it comes to the situation around Bakhmut, well, Ukrainian officials say that the situation is difficult and the area is facing intense shelling. Of course, this comes after we heard from the head of the Wagner paramilitary group over the weekend, stating that they believe that they had captured a village nearby to that strategically important city of Bakhmut. Of course, you rightly mentioned reports from the Russian Defense Ministry reporting gains of around 2 kilometers over the past 4 days. Of course, it's very difficult to independently verify troop movements and offensives on the ground. But we've also heard from Ukrainian forces. They say that they have repelled Russian advances in at least 4 regions.
Yes, so Ukraine's military saying they're maintaining their defence along the front line in Donetsk. Tell us more.
Absolutely. Well, any kind of advances that Russia has made has come at a very heavy cost of human life. We've heard from UK intelligence in recent days saying that they believe the last couple of weeks has been the deadliest for Russian forces since the escalation in the conflict a year ago. We've also heard from Ukrainian forces saying very pointedly that they believe that in one particular area in Donetsk, in Vuhudar, they estimate that an entire brigade of Russian forces has been destroyed. That means that they estimate that up to 5,000 Russian forces have either been killed, wounded or captured. So significant losses there. Reportedly on the Ukrainian side. And this, of course, comes as UK intelligence are also reporting that Russian forces are digging in, increasing their defensive capabilities in a couple of regions in anticipation of potential Ukrainian counteroffensives in the future.
Well done, Slo, in Kyiv. Thank you.
As Will was just saying in his reports, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg says Russia has already stepped up its offensive in Ukraine. Meanwhile, as Moscow makes less money due to energy sanctions, it's asking businesses to pay more to the Treasury. Our correspondent Stuart Smith is live in Moscow. Stuart, what's the latest from Russia on the fighting in Ukraine?
Well, for all this talk of an offensive going on, it doesn't seem that different here in Russia, the way that the Ministry of Defense is portraying operations right now. They're talking as usual about the number of Ukrainian armed forces killed, the equipment, the planes, the tanks that they've destroyed, and they talked indeed about that village near Bakhmut, which the Russian armed forces claim they have now captured. But there's no talk of broader operations or broader success than we've seen for the past 2, 3, 4 weeks. In terms of, though, the broader operation as a whole and where it might go, we have heard some interesting comments from Ramzan Kadyrov. He's the governor of a region of Russia called Chechnya, and he enjoys a lot of autonomy compared to a lot of other regional governors, both in terms of how he manages the republic, but also on what he says about the special military operation. And he was saying in a television interview that he believes it will end by the end of 2023, that 100%, he says, of all Russia's objectives will be completed by then. But he added that he believed those should include the city of Kharkiv and Odessa, which are currently under Ukrainian armed forces control. Another unusual bit of news from Russia on Monday was that the Human Rights Commissioner is looking into complaints from some mobilized citizens from the region of Tatarstan who claim that they were sent to undertake offensive operations, which, first of all, they're not generally meant to be doing, but they were sent without virtually any weapons, they say, and they were used as cannon fodder, they claim. So the Human Rights Ombudsman here is going to be looking into those claims, and there have been many of these videos, but they're not often taken to this high level.
And Stuart, what about what the government is saying about wanting more tax from businesses to pay for this? How is Moscow going to bolster the state coffers?
Yeah, well, it has a problem now, because after the European Union sanctions on the transport and import of oil, well, it really did hit Russia's revenues. It lost year on year in January around 50% of the revenue it was used to, while at the same time it increased spending by around 60%, a third of that increase on security and defence. So to fill that gap, to allow Russia to keep funding its government and its armed forces, it did the things you might expect. It's selling its national reserves to an extent, the Chinese yuan really important there. It's selling tons of gold, but it's also asking Russia's big businesses to step up and donate funds, billions of US dollars equivalent, to the Treasury. And it's also mandating a windfall tax, which we saw on oil and gas companies, where they asked for a one-off payment to fill this gap. But other companies too are getting a tax after the fact that they've already paid their usual corporation tax. So different methods being used by the finance ministry to keep Russia going. No indication, though, that this is going to cause broader problems, that Russia won't be able to pay for this special military operation. It has a lot of reserves and a lot of other tactics it can use to raise more funds.
OK, thanks for that, Stuart. Stuart Smith in Moscow.
Coming up, start your engines. The world's newest SUV gets into gear at the Chicago Auto Show.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The cleanup operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. New Zealand's largest city, Auckland, is bracing for more torrential rain and wind as Cyclone Gabrielle batters large areas of the North Island.
That's right, 46,000 people are already without electricity. More than 500 flights have been cancelled and a state of emergency has been declared in 9 regions. Our correspondent, Owen Poland, has this update.
The wind and the rain are really starting to pick up here in Auckland, and authorities are warning that the worst is yet to come as Cyclone Gabrielle intensifies. The upper North Island has already been hit with torrential rain and gale-force winds gusting up to 160 kilometres an hour, and 8 districts, including Auckland, have now declared a state of emergency. One of the major concerns is for low-lying coastal communities, which are being flooded by a combination of heavy rain and sea surges that have forced hundreds of homes to be evacuated. Around 60,000 people have also lost power, and Auckland's population of 1.7 million are bracing for gale-force winds which could bring down trees and knock out power lines. Emergency shelters and evacuation centres have been set up around the city, and people have been warned that they could be isolated by flooded roads and be without power for up to 3 days. At least 45,000 people have also had their travel plans disrupted after Air New Zealand cancelled all domestic flights in and out of Auckland until the storm is over. International flights leaving the city have also been cancelled. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins says he understands how people must be exhausted coping with all the flooding and damage that's affected at least 25,000 homes in recent weeks. And he's announced an emergency financial package to help support the social services that have been stretched to the limit by the bad weather. The New Zealand Defence Force is also on standby to help with evacuations if they're needed. However, the basic message right now is that Cyclone Gabrielle is going to deliver more rain and severe wind, so people need to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Owen Poland, CGTN, Auckland.
More protests are taking place in Israel against plans to overhaul the judiciary. Tens of thousands gathered outside the country's parliament, voicing their opposition to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to give the government more control over the appointment of judges. Opposition leader Yair Lapid addressed the protesters, while in a rare intervention, President Isaac Herzog urged the government to delay the plans, saying that Israel was on the brink of a, quote, constitutional and social collapse.
The US military has shot down another unidentified object from high altitude. The Pentagon says military fighter jets targeted an octagonal-shaped object near the Canadian border, but they're yet to identify what it is or where it came from. Officials have also not been able to determine how the object was able to fly. It's the third unidentified object to be shot down over North America in as many days.
Wu Yibing has made history, becoming the first Chinese men's player to lift an ATP Tennis Tour trophy. The 23-year-old saved 4 championship points before winning the Dallas Open. The win pushes him up to 58th in the world rankings.
From sports cars to pickup trucks, there's a ride for everyone at the Chicago Auto Show. North America's biggest car event shifts into high gear after 3 years off the track because of pandemic disruption. Dan Williams gets behind the wheel.
The Chicago Auto Show has changed significantly in recent years. There are now fewer car launches, but the event is going big on experience, whether it's test driving an electric vehicle or examining the capabilities of a pickup truck. Camp Jeep began offering ride-alongs in 2004. It expects to celebrate its 3 millionth customer here in Chicago.
Chicago is one of the best examples of that immersive experience where you can put Jeeps in their natural environment. We bring that to our customers in a way that they can experience the Jeep vehicles, and I think that is never going to go old.
All right, should we give it a go?
Let's do it.
All right. So we decided to try it out. But the real star of this particular ride-along is Camp Jeep Mountain. It almost touches the roof of the show hall, and it gives a thrill to the riders both on the way up and the way down. If that's not quite your style, Toyota has a variety of sporting options for visitors to try, from curling to wheelchair basketball, and in turn entice visitors to its stand.
But when you think about an auto show is a place where consumers can come and they can shop in a very low-key environment and be exposed to all of our vehicles and learn about them at their own pace and on their own time. It's a very enjoyable experience. So we think they do play a role, a key role going forward. It's probably just a different role than we've seen them play in the past.
And if that is all too much, well, you can always try out one of the show's car simulators, giving you a taste of speed without leaving your chair. Dan Williams, CGTN, Chicago.
Now, finally on the programme, a large meteor has lit up the night sky off the coast of southern Britain. Social media footage showed the object burning up as it headed towards the Earth before it disintegrated in a huge flash of light. Wow, look at that. Can't believe we missed it. No little green men were found, though, Juliet, I'm afraid.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. Coming up next, Africa Live. See you again tomorrow, though, same time, same place. From me, Juliet, and the rest of the team in London. Goodbye.
Goodbye.